Hello everyone, and welcome to a different kind of video. Um, One that I've not done for quite some time on the channel, and one that I wanted to talk about for some time, but for whatever varying reasons it never quite came together. And that is Halo. And it's a game that I haven't covered well. I think I've got maybe one, possibly two videos up about Halo. But overall, I haven't really put much in the way of any kind of Halo content up on the channel, and Halo is actually one of my all-time favourite games. And I just wanted to have a talk about it here, and talk about how it was this game that actually turned me on to getting a Microsoft console in the first place. There were other games, but this was chiefly the one that I was motivated the most to play. So I had a PlayStation 2 and I had a GameCube, and I'd had them for some time, but I'd always been a big fan of first person shooters, going back to them on the PC. I've gone into my history with Doom. I'm not going to go back there again with that, but I'd always loved them. But on games consoles, it was very commonplace for first person shooters back then to be quite limited, simply because the consoles were perceived to not have the power to do quite the sprawling, detailed, vast first person shooters that the PC was capable of, and indeed that was true for the most part. In that generation of consoles, before I played Halo, my favourite first person shooter on console at that point, taking Doom aside, was Medal of Honor Frontline on the PlayStation 2. Now, it was a fantastic game. I love the Medal of Honor games on the original PlayStation. So this new one that came out, it to me was fantastic, and I really enjoyed playing it. But again, in spite of the fact that it was a fantastic game and everything, it didn't have the expansive nature that Allied Assault had on the PC. You know, when you played Allied Assault, it was a much bigger game. You know, the level maps, the environments, there was a lot more to go around, walk around. It just felt big. Whereas the games on the PS2, you felt like you were going down a much narrower corridor. So I'd actually heard of Halo before the Xbox come out. Originally, because Bungie used to make games for the Mac, and as I understand it, at one point Halo was going to be a Mac and PC game. I'm not 100% sure whether it was for both or one or the other, but that was how it was originally intended. And then Microsoft decided to take it on board and bring it in-house, and bring Bungie in-house to work on this to be a console exclusive for the Xbox. And of course, at that point, I didn't have an Xbox, my interest in it died, but I was aware of this game that a lot of people said was revolutionizing first person shooters on games consoles. Now, as we all know, hyperbole can get out of control when people talk about games, and sometimes that can be very much the case when a really good game comes out and people say, oh, it's genre defining, you know, it changes everything, and you can be a bit wary of it. But in my personal opinion, Halo was such a game. It did change what people perceive could be done on games consoles with regards to first person shooters. I remember finally picking up the original Xbox, and Halo was a must, because that was the game I chiefly wanted the console for. I was aware that it had other good games, and I got those in due course, and the Xbox rapidly became one of my favourite consoles of that generation. But without doubt, for me personally, it was Halo. That was the game that I was chiefly preoccupied with, and the game that I wanted to play the most. So when I got my Xbox, and I remember unpackaging this huge console, certainly compared to the GameCube that it was sat next to, it's like the GameCube could fit in 1/4 the size of this thing. It was like a behemoth in comparison. I mean, when people talk about Xbox One and the size of the Xbox One, you have to remember that the original Xbox was a beast as well, and it weighed some too. It was a really hefty console. I remember thinking to myself, my god, if you drop this on your foot, you would be seriously needing a trip to the hospital in order to get your foot fixed. And anyway, yeah, I remember setting it all up and turning the console on, and the excitement, really. I mean, I didn't get the console at launch. I actually picked up the console, was it 18 months into its life cycle? Maybe 18 months, maybe even 2 years. I actually can't remember when I got it now, because normally I get consoles in and around launch, or for a very specific day, say for a Christmas or birthday. But I actually went out and bought an Xbox just on par. I was working at the time, and I just decided, the hell with it. A game where I bought it from, the store game, were having a special at the time. That's all I remember, and I was there, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get this. I got Halo with it, a Motor GP game, a motorbike racing game, of which I can't remember the name of, but that was really good. Rally Sport Challenge, sorry, good God. I should have really written this stuff down before I started this video, but as usual, I'm just doing things on the fly off the top of my head, and yeah, sometimes it doesn't work too well, sometimes my memory lets me down, but anyway, yeah, so it was Rally Sport Challenge. That was really good, and that's a series of games I'm amazed that have never made it into the modern generation, or at least at all outside of that generation, the Xbox and PS2 generation of consoles. But anyway, yeah, I got quite a few games with it, and I really enjoyed playing on them. I really enjoyed that console. I mean, the definitive moment for it for me post Halo was when Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2 arrived. I mean, I adored those games, and they didn't come out on any other console. They only come out on PC and Mac, I think, at a later date. But I absolutely loved those games, and yeah, I mean, like I say, the PS2 I had the longest. I got that when it came out, but at the end of that generation of consoles, the Xbox was the one that I played on the most, and it was more powerful than the others. So when it came to multi-platform games, naturally I went and bought them for the Xbox, and enjoyed the superior graphics. Not massively superior in a lot of cases, because the multiplats really didn't take much in the way of advantage at times. But certainly when it comes to the definitive games, or platform-specific first-party exclusive games, you could really tell there was a difference. And Halo was the first time that happened. When I started to play the game, it was the first game that I put into play. I immediately knew that the sort of hyperbole that had been coming out, the praise that had been coming out, wasn't unwarranted at all. It was most definitely worthy of the praise that it was getting. Interestingly, just as a side note, what you're watching here is I'm playing the game Halo Combat Evolved, which was the anniversary edition, which came out on the Xbox One. It originally came out on the Xbox 360, and it featured updated graphics and reworked sound. There was probably, I think I put in here, towards the start, you can press a button on the joypad and it reverts the graphics instantly back to how they were when they first come out on the Xbox. Obviously this is not Xbox graphics. It would have been one hell of a machine if the original Xbox been capable of graphics like this. And yeah, it's funny because even though they updated the graphics, the gameplay still feels the same. They kept the gameplay mechanics pretty much the same. And what was interesting was Halo, it straddled really two periods, two moments in gaming. There are elements of this that are still very console based. There are no iron sight aiming for the most part. And when you look at the game like here now, there are no iron sights. You can get some guns that do have a scope on them, but for the most part, like classic first person shooters of its time and what went before, it's just shooting from the hip. And it's interesting now when you go back and play games like this, is back then that was absolutely normal. Like, iron sights were more rare than they are now. People just expect every first person shooter for you to pull the left trigger or, you know, press the right mouse button wherever you've got it mapped and it will bring up your gun sights. Back then, that was not that commonplace. There were some games that had it, but the mechanics that you see here, the aiming mechanics with the guns, were pretty much as it was, like it was with Doom. It was only later on that games started to adopt the idea of iron sights more and more. And like I say, before anybody says anything, I know there were games that around at the time that did have iron sights, but this was a very, very common mechanic that you saw in Halo. And that is interesting, going back and playing it and looking at it through the avenue of hindsight, through the benefit of playing first person shooters for years post Halo. It's just an interesting thing to see that, you know, here is this game that I still think holds up well today, but has a lot of the old school shooting mechanics in the game, and it works for me. It works in the sense that there is an opportunity for you to play the game in a couple of different ways. If you really want to run and gun, you can, because when you bring up sights in a game, it slows you down. And games that have iron sights in, it makes the dynamic of the game different. Getting accuracy when you're shooting becomes a little bit more slow, a little bit more ponderous as you bring the gun up to aim down the sights. It instinctively requires you to stop, or to at least go slow. Whereas this still has the old school run and gun mechanics going on, but you can also be a bit more tactical, because you can get the sniper rifle, you can get a pistol that has a scope. I can't remember what the name of I can't remember if the beam rifle is in Halo. I should know that, shouldn't I? But anyway, yeah, there are some weapons that you do aim down the sights with. You do have a scope, should I say. Now, just quickly, this part here, when I first saw this on the original Xbox, bearing in mind this is within the first half hour of getting the console, allowing me to actually get to this bit, I was impressed already by what I'd seen when you're fighting on the Pillar of Autumn. When I got to this bit, I was blown away. Now, okay, it doesn't look as good as it does here, because again, this is the one that was remastered for the Xbox 360, and I think they tweaked it a little bit for the Xbox One. But I was really, really impressed by this, because the one thing that became really apparent very quickly once you actually land on the Halo itself is just how vast the levels were. Was how big this game was, how epic it felt. And this was around the time, there you go, I was just aiming down the sights there with the pistol. It's kind of weird that the pistol has a scope on it, but your assault rifle doesn't, but whatever. Yeah, when I got to this bit and I realised what people were saying about this is a game that before Halo, nothing like this had ever really been seen on consoles. And in terms of the epicness and the scale. And I did find that very interesting. I did find that curious that before this, there was nothing really like it. It was just something you'd expect to find on PC, is what I'm trying to say. And here I was, on a games console, sat with a controller, and there is this vast world for you to just explore, for you to go around, for you to see what's in it. And it felt seamless at the time as well. It was, you know, to the younger mind, and back then the more inexperienced mind, it was very difficult to see, quote unquote, where the joins are. You know, there's some games that do have the vastness to the games. There is a lot of trickery that goes on to sort of build an illusion. I remember one thing that was accused of this game was that some of the levels, particularly I think when you were on the Covenant ship, some of them were mirrors. Some of the areas were mirrors of other areas, and it's interesting to think that something like that was pointed at this game at the time. Yet it almost feels like a nitpick, because, well, it was still there. The levels were still there. The accusation of reusing assets over and over, and I'm like, yeah, but when you think about it, the scope of the game, the scale of the game, and all of that was still there, and on that generation of games consoles. And when you think as well that even going into the generation of the Xbox 360 and PS3, there were still some games on PC that were difficult to translate to console, simply because they didn't have the memory available, they didn't have the ability to work the game properly on that console. Crysis leaps to mind. They did a translation of Crysis for games consoles that actually had some things missing. And one wouldn't think that now. You know, with the modern consoles that we have, the PS4, the Xbox One, are so close to PCs. They are basically PCs. So we don't tend to think in line of things being missing, or PC owners will hate me for saying this, but games don't seem as dumbed down for consoles anymore. I await the hatred, PC owners, but bear with me with my point. If games were made exclusively, well, games were made primarily for consoles back a few years ago, you would have had a number of games that felt far more restrictive than they do now. Of course, PCs are capable of more than what your humble garden variety average everyday games console is capable of. That goes without saying. Okay, PC owners, before you start sharpening the knives, that goes without saying. I'm not arguing it, but the point is that those two, the gap between the two has narrowed dramatically this generation. And although the graphics may not be there, certainly in terms of level complexity and design, there isn't any difference. If you go back to Doom on the PlayStation, even though that version of the game came out some 2 years after the PC version, there were things missing because the PlayStation wasn't capable of being able to successfully create the more complex levels, the more vertical type levels, you think that there's whole sections of Doom 2 missing, especially where you were the downtown level, I think it is, or the level where you're inside the city or whatever, is completely removed because the PlayStation just couldn't cope. It couldn't do it. You don't get that now. You wouldn't get whole chunks of a game that were either changed or simplified or missing altogether because of the lack of power that games consoles have. So, going back to the original Xbox, when that type of thing was still a relatively common occurrence, you can see how impressed a console player would be in seeing a game like this running on a console, because this back then just wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't supposed to be the way. And I was just massively impressed, and it was a changing point in how I perceive console gaming, and in a way influenced me in deciding to step away from PC gaming when the next generation arrived. As I've said in the past, I think I mentioned it when I did my video looking back on the Xbox 360. When I got that console, I was at a point where I was either going to get the Xbox 360 in a high definition television, which they weren't cheap back then, or I was going to get a new PC. Now, I'd not long since got a PC before they went. I had a Pentium 4, then they went dual core, and that was a watershed moment if you were gaming on PC, because some games that started to come out really ran like crap on a Pentium 4, but ran okay on a dual core. So at that point I had to think, do I want to go down the path of getting a new PC already? Because I'd only had that one about 18 months to 2 years. I didn't really feel like I'd got my money's worth out of it. And although I was playing a lot of games on the PC at the time, I did feel I was missing playing on consoles, and the fact that I'd seen that the gap between console and PC was already narrowing. Already I'd seen the fact that, you know, games that were complex, as complex RPGs, I'll say complex RPGs and people laugh, but I mean in terms of the mechanics, games like Knights of the Old Republic, they didn't appear on the PS2, and they didn't appear on the GameCube, but they did appear on the Xbox. So naturally for me, I thought, well, the next Xbox that comes along is going to be more powerful, right? We're going to get more of these things that I really like, and I would much rather play them on a high definition television, because like I say, my reasoning at the time was my PC, even though it was technically out of date as a games machine, I hadn't actually had that long, and I had spent quite a bit of money on it. So it was a relatively simple thing for me to go and transition from the original Xbox to the Xbox 360. And of course, I had a little while to wait before Halo 3 come out, and I will cover the other Halo games in videos down the line. My intention is to make a video for each Halo game. They probably won't be as long as this, because I am covering the original Xbox as well, as Halo, because to me the two things were linked together. I will forever associate the original Xbox with Halo, because as I've said before, those are the two things that it drove me to buy this console, and this was a game that I desperately wanted to play. You know, it's funny sometimes, because when I think in more modern day terms, what games really do compel you to want to buy a specific games console? They really tend to be established franchises now. The other thing that you have to bear in mind is this was new. Halo was new. You know, there had been no previous Halo games. At a stretch, you could say that the marathon games that came out on the Mac that Bungie developed were kind of precursors or forerunners, to borrow Halo phraseology. They were sort of the kind of a prototype to Halo. They were game that kind of does them a bit of disservice. But in terms of Halo itself, it was fresh out of the gate. It was a new franchise. It was a new series of games. And yeah, just to think that games that are now, you know, we talk about these exclusives and so many of them are sequels, that we forget that once upon a time these were all new. You know, we've got Halo 5, but we've actually had more than 5 Halo games. You know, we've had a couple of spin-offs in the series, as well as the real-time strategy games. But you forget that this was the origin. Halo Combat Evolved was from where all of that Halo expanded universe came from. And it's kind of weird to think back at, you know, as to a time when stuff like that was new. Even now, Gears of War, you know, the Gears of War was born on the Xbox 360. It was, you know, that was where it started. It was new, it was fresh. And the Forza came out on the original Xbox first of all. Funnily enough, I never played the original Forza, and I don't understand why, because I love racing games, and the only thing I can think is that, because I don't know when it come out, but I can only think it may have come out late on in the Xbox's life cycle, but maybe not, I don't know. If someone can let me know in the comments section about that, that'd be great, because I love Forza and I can't imagine I wouldn't have wanted to play it. Something must have put me off, because a racing game that good and that respected, there's no way I wouldn't have played it. That said, I was probably more occupied with the likes of Project Gotham Racing. God, did I love that game. And Gran Turismo on the PS2. But even so, there must have been a reason why I didn't get Forza, because I've had every other Forza game and loved them all. Forza 4 remains my ultimate favourite, though Forza 7, I've been really enjoying that as well, but I'm getting sidetracked here. Let's get back on topic. So yeah, it was just, again, to reiterate, you know, Halo just was that defining moment. I've had a few of them down the years. Doom obviously is the one that I say is my all-time favourite, and it was a defining moment for me in gaming. But that's not to do disservice to this game, because this game was incredible, and it was a console defining moment for me. This became the barometer by which I would judge all of the first person shooters. I remember when Killzone came out on the PlayStation 2, and I really enjoy the Killzone games, but they hailed it at the time, you know, part of the promotional thing was it's Sony's Halo killer. And for me, it wasn't. I know there's going to be some fanboys out there that are raging at that, but for me, personally, It wasn't. It was a great game. It was a great game. I love playing it. I've enjoyed the Killzone series. I've liked them all. But the original Killzone, to call it Sony's Halo killer, it wasn't. That's just my personal view on it. It wasn't. And it was kind of amusing because I think when this hit, I don't think too many people could have conceived of how successful this was going to be. First of all, because you had this new games console, you had the original Xbox. You can't call it Xbox One now. It's the original Xbox. And so it was a new console. And you're going up against this juggernaut that was the PlayStation 2. You have to remember that as well. The PlayStation 2 had a considerable head start on the Xbox. And so it's not unreasonable for people to have written this console off, and therefore by consequence written off the games that were coming out for it, simply because of the fact that, well, how could this upstart console possibly get any traction against the PlayStation 2, which had swept all before it? And that's actually a fair judgment to make. That's actually a fair question to ask, because when you think about it, in modern standards, by modern definitions, the original Xbox was probably deemed sales-wise to be not particularly successful. Yet from that came a hugely successful game series, and also a console that was deemed to have done well enough at the time for them to make 2 more consoles, or 3 if you include the Xbox One X. And that's kind of unusual in that sense, because we look at, if you think of, say, a game that comes out on a console and is a new franchise, so it's not part of an established series, and that particular console doesn't turn over massive amounts of units in that generation, in today's market, there is no way a big budget AAA game would get a sequel. Absolutely not. Halo probably would have ended up reverting back to Bungie becoming back to an independent studio, and Halo probably would, in the modern market, I'm not talking about the market back with the Xbox first came out, this is a commentary really on how different the games industry is now. It would have gone multi-platform. Think of Titanfall, for example, where that was a console exclusive to the Xbox One, but at that particular time the Xbox One hadn't sold an awful lot of units, and neither did Titanfall. It didn't sell a huge amount of units that's such a hype AAA game, bearing in mind the history of Titanfall. It was Respawn Studios, which of course was Zampella and West from the infamous Infinity Ward, behind the often quoted better Call of Duty games. I do dispute that, but they without doubt they made for me the best Call of Duty game, which was Call of Duty 2, so we can let them off with that. But that game didn't do so well, and so the sequel goes multi-platform. If you think also, here's another interesting thing, the original Mass Effect was Microsoft Studios released that, and then it went multi-platform with EA, and now via whatever licenses you could get Mass Effect on the PlayStation 3. It's weird to consider that a game like Halo, which was obviously a big budget AAA title when it come out. It had been in the pipeline for a long time. It had been worked on for quite a considerable period of time. Today would have gone multi-platform. I just think that's interesting. The sequel, Halo 2, would probably, like I say, Bungie would have been dropped. The franchise probably gone away with them, and you would have ended up with Halo being a multi-platform console release, which is not what happened. And it speaks to the definition of success in the games industry changing considerably. You know, obviously production budgets, whatever increases have occurred there, have played a part in that. But it is interesting. Nevertheless, it's just an interesting observation. It's not intended to be any kind of statement of fact or anything. It's just an interesting observation. But it was hugely popular on the original Xbox. It was a defining game. It was critically acclaimed. And of course it got a sequel on the original Xbox as well, which again is even more of, an interesting thing. Microsoft clearly believed in the product. They believed that this would be a defining game, that this is something that they were willing to invest in. And also, Microsoft similarly felt the same way about the Xbox, that they were willing to, they were willing to back something, even though most people said, "Oh, you've got no chance of winning." It's kind of curious that even when Microsoft went into the following generation, they did not think that they would be out the PS3 for as long as they did. The PS3, in terms of total units sold, I think crept past the Xbox 360 towards the end of the last generation, or they're tied. It really does tend to depend on which source you look at. But global sales, not sales just in one region, but the whole lot added together, they're very, very close. If not, the PS3 slightly edged it, but they were very close. At one point, there was a huge gulf between them, that the 360 was miles ahead. And I don't think Microsoft anticipated that either. So it showed that there was a benefit to actually playing the long game and investing in the hardware and investing in the software for that. Actually saying, okay, we don't need to make billions of dollars off each game. I'm sure the original Halo was profitable, because again, they wouldn't have needed to sell as many units in order to break even or make a profit. But it's just interesting to know the differing attitudes than there are now. And of course, back then there was no microtransactions for Halo, and so it was your straightforward, pay once and play the game. But I absolutely loved it. I've gone back and played this game multiple times down the years. It's one of those games, like Doom, that I will go back and play. Probably not as religiously as I have with Doom, but certainly I would say a close second. I mean, I would say that I've played Halo more than I've played Half-Life and Half-Life 2 now. There might have been a time where they were relatively close together, but I've gone back and played Halo quite a few times, and since I got the Xbox One, I've gone back and actually played the campaign through twice, and played quite a bit more of it when I was amassing together the footage to do this video. And I got swept away. Like, I intended to make this like a 20-minute video, and I know, because as I'm recording my voiceover for this, I'm looking at the count of the actual video itself, and it's over an hour. And it's just because I got so into playing the game that I recorded so much footage, and I just got so into it. And because on the Xbox One now, if you plug an external device like an external hard drive or a memory stick, you can actually capture the game footage straight to that device. So, as a bit of a throwback to my previous video, this has actually fixed a problem that I had, where the only way I could get game footage was by streaming, because I didn't have a HD PVR that could actually record footage off the PS4 and Xbox One. That problem has solved itself, and it only required me. Well, I was going to buy an additional external hard drive anyway, but that was the only investment required. So I've been really pleased, because it has enabled me to do this series of videos that I've wanted to do. And yeah, you know, makes a big difference. Sorry about that, just had to take a drink, keep my voice going. So, what next? What to talk about next with this series of games? And you know, that generation of consoles, I really do think it was the beginning of consoles starting to think of themselves as more than just the quick fix devices that perhaps they were perceived to be in the past. Certainly I think the roots of that were planted with the PlayStation, but you know, as a device that was targeted more to an older audience than they had been previously. And PlayStation represented quite a fundamental shift in tone when you had games like Resident Evil, Silent Hill, games like that, which were clearly more adult in their themes than games before. There were some games that appealed to adults before, but it was quite a step up because of the better graphics, the superior sound, the more immersive games become. It opened up avenues for better games, and you saw that come to fruition with games like Halo. For me, you started to see, wow, those big advancements, the next generation come round, and you had them really big moments in games, those set pieces. I remember one of my favourite levels, and I can't believe I should have captured the footage of it here, but I didn't think when I was capturing it. The level of Silent Cartographer in this game is one of my favourite levels in video games ever. You come in on the Pelican dropship, and you're inside, and any moment you're expecting the game to stop and load, and then you would just miraculously be on this beach, because that's how it was. Those were the limitations of the hardware back then. But that particular occasion, you come in, and the Pelican just comes in, and it touches down, and you walk out of the Pelican, and there was no real gap. There was no loading screen. It was just like boom, and you were in the game. And it was so immersive, because he really did. It kind of took away the video gaminess that there was at the time, where you'd have a cutscene, and then it would load, and then you would be in the game. And here, that really didn't happen. It was, like I said earlier, it just felt more seamless. Transitions felt more seamless, even though they were using some tricks. You'll see the borders had come in a little bit, and clearly it was loading at that point. But it was so much more of a better thing. It was far less jarring than what had been before. And I remember that. I remember playing the game, and it was just that one of those sort of standout moments. You know, you think, wow, that's incredible. Like, how is that? How is that? How is that possible? Of course, I mean, not being technically minded at all, just being a gamer, just playing the games. It did. It blew me away, really, just how these little things can make such a big difference, and that kind of attention to detail as well. Something that most people wouldn't have, probably wouldn't have really thought about, to be honest with you. I mean, who would really sit there and think about it? But when it's there, it makes a difference. It is kind of like when you play the later Uncharted games, and your character's walking, and as he goes near a wall, he puts his hand out, and just like brushes his hand against the wall. It's not necessary, but it adds to the immersion in the game, because that's what you would do. You get near a wall, you just subconsciously put your hand on the wall and sort of brush away. It's things like that, it's moments like that that make a big deal. So let's get into the story for what it is in Halo. These days they obviously put a lot more emphasis on narrative, but Halo still had a pretty good story, and it was a simple story. But what was interesting is it kind of a bit like Star Wars. You're coming into a battle, and you know that some conflict has already happened. Something has already happened that you've not seen. You start the game and you see the Pillar of Autumn, which is your home ship. It's the big ship at the start of the game. And that's it. I mean, you know that you're running away from these Covenant forces that are trying to hunt you down and kill you. You know there's been this conflict, there's been this war, there's been this attack that's been catastrophic for humanity. But you're not explicitly shown it. And very much like the crawl at Star Wars tells you all of these things that have happened before but you've not seen. That's kind of how Halo starts. You're being taken out of cryosleep as the Master Chief. And that's it. All of this information is being pumped to you. And it's kind of interesting that now when I think back, you go, oh, I know what happened. The Reach was attacked, it was glassed by the Covenant, this happened, that happened, but you've played Halo Reach, so you've seen it happen. Halo Reach being the game that was the prequel to Halo. Interestingly enough, Bungie's last game that they did for Microsoft in the Halo series before they passed the torch on to 343. But you don't know that when you're playing this game. You've not seen that. You've not played Halo Reach because it hadn't been made yet and wasn't going to be made for quite a few years. And so it's a little bit weird at first, almost somewhat disorientating, and it kind of works so well. The absence of going over the top to show, half an hour worth of cutscenes to just put you into it and make you feel disorientated actually works brilliantly with the way that the Master Chief is kind of disorientated coming out of cryosleep. It really helps with the immersion. Kind of like what Half-Life did when you play as Gordon Freeman and you take the ride to work. You're not told anything. You're told nothing. And this minimalistic approach to the stories really work, and I really wish more games would do that now, because there's a reason why these games were so fondly looked at. It was because they didn't take your hand. They weren't trying to win an Oscar for the best script with every game that come out, but they successfully told the story, but the story never got in the way of the game. And you could blast through this game and not pay any attention to what's going on and just kill everything, and it still works. You don't need to pick up on every element of the story. I mean, it's great to do so because you've got this whole universe that's been created, but it isn't necessary. And it's one of the many things I love what they did with the Halo series at this point, is they kept everything minimal, and that makes the game just that bit more enjoyable for me. They did something similar with Doom 2016. Sorry, just had to take another drink there. Yeah, Doom 2016, you start the game, and within seconds you're shooting things. And the story of what's going on is being revealed to you bit by bit as you go along. Halo focused on the important elements of what you're doing, where you're going, less on the unimportant things at this time, is who are you and where you come from. I mean, you're called the Master Chief, but that's pretty much it. I mean, your backstory, aside from, I can't remember, but could it have, it was probably in the instruction manual, perhaps. I don't know, I can't remember. But that's where a lot of backstory tended to be put, sort of stashed out of the way in an instruction book. It was never front and centre to the game, and that was very much the case with Halo. As years gone by, that's changed somewhat, and I'll come to that when I come to the other Halo games in the series, if I think on. But it has changed. And going back and playing Halo, it's just always that wonderful reminder of the minimalistic attitude to story and the maximum investment in gameplay. And yet still, I never felt like I was unaware of the narrative of what it was that I was supposed to be doing, where it was I was supposed to be going, what I needed to do in order to win. Those things I understood as I was playing through the game. And the foes as well, the bad guys, the Covenant, were interesting. That here you have this very theologically based, religious based alien race, which was kind of unique in that they are very fanatical, but also seemingly very religious. I mean, by their very name itself, the Covenant implies religion, and they use words like heretic and sacred and things like that. They are motivated to preserve what they perceive to be holy. The Halos being a holy thing. I mean, you just think about it. The phrase Halo itself. The fact that when you start the game, these Gregorian singing style, like you've just walked into a monastery, up on the side of a mountain somewhere. That's the first thing that assaults your senses when you're playing the game. And there's this fantastic mixture of like rhythmic tribal drums, and then modern symphony, and occasionally like electric guitars kick in, and it's a fusion of so many different things. Like almost it delves into the sort of the psyche of all of these different things being thrust together, these convergences, technology, theology, all of these things are sort of thrust together within this game, and it's fantastic. It works so well, and it hits you the moment you start to play the game. It hits you, and I love that. I love how that presented itself. And you've got the flood, you know, this sort of monstrous distortion, this sort of creeping bioterror. You know, this race that is designed to absorb and change and disfigure and assimilate all of the life. And you realise that the Covenant are merely a mirror of you and who you are. They call you the demon, they're the Covenant, you know. And you look at that and you think to yourself, wow, like, then there's the flood. And they're the enemy of everything. They are the enemy of life. And it kind of makes the conflict between you and the Covenant seem irrelevant. You know, there is this greater threat, there is this greater danger to everything. And I love that. I love how the game worked that. Some people weren't keen on the flood because they felt that they got in the way of you fighting the Covenant, but I disagree. I disagree entirely with that sentiment. I don't think they get in the way at all. You're always fighting the Covenant. But at the same time, the game upped the stakes, it upped the ante. Suddenly it's not just about escaping the Covenant or fighting the Covenant in a very localized event. You know, you've had this war, and you know, with the Covenant, and then suddenly from this you realise there's something that's going to consume and take over life in the whole galaxy, the whole universe, if it possibly can. And that becomes the greater objective that you have to have. You have to have the greater objective that escalates things. Normally that's the kind of thing that's reserved for a sequel. And it's interesting that this actually happens within the game, within the first game. And maybe one criticism could be levelled was that it didn't necessarily leave anybody any direction to go, any place to go for the sequel, but more of the same. But when what you had was so good in the first instance, the sequel itself, if it was more of the same, who's going to complain, right? Certainly not me. Certainly not this early on in the series' life. So I'm pretty much getting towards the end of what I've got to say. I've kind of, you know, gone off on a tangent here and there, rambled on for a while, but I just wanted to have a talk about Halo and its effect on me getting the original Xbox, because to me it was a big thing. You know, it was the first time I'd gone from it was the first time I'd actually gone out there and took a chance on a console that, for me, there wasn't a mass load of games. You know, there were some of the games I was interested in, but there wasn't like a mass load of games I was super excited for, but apart from Halo. So it really went against how I normally operate. But yeah, I loved it, and I was so glad that I did take that chance. And yeah, I'm pretty sure a lot of other people did too. And yeah, let's say I think I'm pretty much getting to the end now of what I've got to say. And you know, thanks to anybody who's managed to stick through this enormously protracted ramble. It has been a ramble. I do appreciate it. I do appreciate, you know, watching these videos. I do appreciate people actually coming in and taking the time to watch them, because you know, particularly long videos like this, covering one particular topic, it can be pretty difficult to get through. But yeah, you know, I hope there's anybody who's never played Halo, anybody out there that's never actually taken the time to play these games might be inspired to play. That'd be great, because I love them, and like I say, I've wanted to make a video like this about it for some time. I hadn't really intended it to be so much of a long ass waffle video, but I kind of got lost with myself because I don't script this stuff. I just tend to say whatever's coming into my mind. Sometimes I say the same thing but in a different way. But yeah, anyway guys, thank you for watching this. If you haven't checked out Halo, it's well worth a bash, and yeah, stay tuned for more videos to come soon. Thanks for watching.